guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are continuing on my movie series. I had the scratch off poster of 100 essential films and I just watched the second movie, so 98 more to go. So the second movie, Graffiti, came out in 1973. I will preface by saying, like, I've heard of this movie, like I've heard of the movie title, but I guess I had like no concept of what this movie was about. Like, I had no idea. And like on the scratch off poster, it has a driver's license, not a driver's license, a license plate. And so I was like, oh, it's like a car movie, but then it's American Graffiti. Like, it still didn't register what it was about. It was more of this coming of age type movie. One of the main characters' name is Steve, played by Ron Howard, and I totally forgot that he used to act in things before he was a director. And his best friend, Kurt, they've just graduated high school and they're getting ready to go off to college, and Steve's character is like super ready to go and Kurt is a little bit like, I don't know about this. And then they have two other friends. The one, his last name is ringing a bell, Milner, and he seems to be like older than these guys and just like still living at home. And Terry, who I think is my favorite of the bunch. Yeah, the movie like follows these four guys getting ready for like their next stage of life. I was also surprised that the movie was directed and I think written by George Lucas, which I honestly did not know that he did anything other than Star Wars, so like, news to me. Some of my favorite parts of the movie was like the actual direction. So very big like names behind it with him and Ron Howard. Harrison Ford's in the movie. Suzanne Summers has a guest appearance, and I'm a huge 90s fan, and she was in Step by Step, and she has like a very brief but like pivotal appearance. And I had no idea what to expect. And I like really like coming of age movies. But I had to like do some research after I watched the movie because I was trying to figure out why it was considered an essential movie in the scratch off poster. And so I went ahead and did some Googling, read some reviews, and I learned a lot of good information. The fact that this movie came out in 1973 is really important. It came out right as like the Vietnam War was, you know, like wrapping up for the US. All of these people who grew up in the 50s and 60s were experiencing a lot of huge moments in US history, and like the culture was shifting. So it seems like for that generation, this movie was really nostalgic and pays homage to like the good old days and just like what it was like before, you know, you kind of go out into the world, just like the simplicity of life. And in that regard, I totally get it, because my generation, us millennials, are super nostalgic. Like, I think we're known now as a generation who's like super nostalgic. I have such affinity for the things that I grew up watching. My favorite show of all time is Boy Meets World. They are now doing a podcast rewatch for that show, and I listened to it, and they're coming out on tour. I'm going to go catch their live show because like, that's how nostalgic I am for that show. Some of my favorite movies are from like the early 2000s, end of the 90s. That time period was, for me, so simple before all the craziness that seems like life has thrown at us time and time again since. Like, I understand that concept that this movie was that for them. The overarching storyline that Steve and Kurt have, which is like Steve being super excited to like get out of this small town and like experience the world, and then Kurt having this, yeah, I don't know if I'm going or not. Like, I think that concept is still very relatable because I can totally resonate with that. I was definitely the person who was like ready to get out of the town that I grew up in and just experience a new side of life and get out there in the world. And I also have had friends who are like very okay with just like staying where they're at. That theme still exists today, right? Like that is still something all of us are going through. Do I go and take the risk and see what else is out there, or do I just, you know, like things are good here, like there's no need to kind of jump into something. There's nothing wrong with either of those. So I think those themes are still very sound in today's world and life and totally relatable. You could also tell that this was a different period in history because the movie follows these 4 white guys and none of them are particularly likable. I didn't connect to any of them. I liked Terry the most because he seems like your goofy, nerdy friend, and like he had that lightness about him. But even him, like I wasn't overly invested in any of their storylines. Honestly, a lot of it, I understand for people who grew up in that time, it seems like the good old days and things were so much simpler then. But looking at it from today's lens, there was a lot of questionable things in that movie. There was a whole plot line with Milner. I may be like making up his whole name. Who's like the older guy, has already, I guess, graduated and is just there. He was trying to hit up on these girls who were in this car and asking for any of them to get in his car. And they send over one of the girls who happens to be a little sister. She's a child and this man has now since graduated, so he's older, now driving around all night together. At no point in this movie does the sister or the girls that sent her off come to look for her or have like any sense of stranger danger. I just didn't understand the point of that storyline. I don't know why it needed to happen. It was just so off. It just was so uncomfortable. He clearly didn't want her there. She just didn't want to go home because she like wanted to go out, and I don't know. It did not age well in my opinion. I did like Laurie's character, who is Steve's girlfriend. At the beginning of the movie, Steve knows he is going off to college, so he just tries to tell Laurie like, hey, like while I'm gone we should see other people, aka we'll end up coming back together, but while we're apart we can do what we want. And it doesn't sit well with her. She's like very upset by it. I did really like her because she did like stand up for herself quite a bit in the movie. At the same time, Steve was like a complete jerk off like over and over and over again, like on multiple occasions through the movie. Borderline like abusive. He's very, like, I don't know, possessive. After he goes on to say that he wants to break up, there's a scene they're at this high school dance, which is very also strange that there's a high school dance after that they graduated. He ends up telling a teacher or the principal that he graduated a semester before, so it's like, why is it a semester later and you're going to a high school dance? The very next day is when they're supposed to leave. Like the timeline of things don't really like add up in my brain. It was very weird. They're at the school dance after he's broken up with her essentially, but he's like, it's our last night, like we should, you know, dance. And he gets like very scary. He's just like, I want to dance now. And she's just like, oh great. And she like thankfully has like an attitude back, but he's basically very possessive. I'm still here, so you're still mine. It just like didn't sit well with me. I really could not stand him. There's a moment later in the movie that happens that it's just like also not a great experience for them. And it's like really irritating because she deserves better. Spoiler alert. They end up together. after all the events that happened, like, she should not be anywhere near that man. There's just like a lot of things that I don't think like stack up to today. I really wish there was like a redeeming moment in this movie, but there just really wasn't, for me anyways. I understand that it's a nostalgic, like, blast from the past, the good old days type of feel for people who grew up in those generations, and maybe there are people who like look at it now and they get it. It just isn't nostalgic for me because I didn't grow up in that era. For me, like, looking at that time period, I don't look at that like the good old days. Like, seems like a very odd time to have existed in. Even though this movie like seems like a very like coming of age, more of a comedy type movie, the way it ends is like more of a harsh reality, like a final scene where they have the fates of all the characters, and it kind of has this like very realistic and like a harsh reality kind of a sense. And I can only imagine, like, at the time that this movie came out, that it was all the more harsher because they also knew the series of events that was coming after this movie takes place. But I think that is also something that, if this kind of a movie was existing in today's world, like I said, as like very nostalgic millennials, that kind of an ending would also resonate with us knowing all the things that have happened in the last several years. If we had this like movie about what it was like in the, you know, the late 90s, early 2000s, and then the series of events that have happened. I mean, we've had quite a bit of heavy life moments that have happened since the late 90s. Knowing that at the time the movie was released, like, the audience knows what is to come in the years of these characters, I totally appreciated that. It's a really interesting narrative. It's like, yes, let's enjoy this moment of remembering our good old days, because we know what we've gone through and we know what it really is like. I'm glad I did the research of this movie because I genuinely don't think I would have liked it at all if I didn't understand the history and the timing of when it came out and just the state of the world. In relation to that, I think it totally makes sense and it serves its purpose for that audience. As a standalone movie, it's not for me. Like I said, a lot of the elements of the movie made me very uncomfortable, but I understand it was a different time. I would give this movie a 2 out of 5 stars because I really do think it was smartly made for the audience it was created for. I just happen to not be that audience. So that is movie 2 under my belt. There are a lot more movies, clearly, 98 more to go. In the comments, let me know if you've ever watched American Graffiti and what you thought about it. Alright guys, have a great day.